Dear students, let us start the discussion on today's newspaper, that is 27th February 2016. Today, the economic survey is released. So, a series of articles exist on economic survey. So, in this context, the first article is related to the nationalism in India. Now, let's recollect yesterday's article. It has spoken about the three different kinds of the nationalism. One is cultural nationalism, that is centered around majoritarianism. Territorial nationalism, that is that is centered around aggrandizement. And finally, we have progressive nationalism, that is centered around the nation building, reducing the inequalities. Now today, the author distinguishes between the origins, that is genesis, and the nature of European nationalism and Indian nationalism. European nationalism, which has come into existence after the Westphalian theory, is based on aggrandizement. So, in this particular nationalism, the danger from within, that's what is been spoken about. So it means this nationalism centered around the majoritarianism and aggrandizement. Unlike this Indian nationalism, it is more and more centered around a democratic plural tradition, and it has origins during our independence movement. In this nationalism, accommodation, tolerance, dissent, respect for the rights, these are the various components, and it is an outshoot of our composite culture. So now, whatever the government is prescribing by sending the police into the universities, it is the older form of the nationalism, that is European tradition. So, the people are branded as national and anti-national based on this aggrandizing tradition of nationalism. So, stressing on this kind of nationalism in a composite culture such as India will lead to a fragmentation of the nation, and India can be converted into a failed nation. And the next is, when you take up the neoliberalism economic model, it rightly fits into the European nature of the nationalism, aggrandizement nationalism. So, in this context, the author says the existing governments move, or else the way it is looking at the things, it is more increasing the divides between the people. The next is economic survey. Now, with regard to this, I have divided this into various components. The first one is about growth. Economic survey says that we can expect a growth of 7 to 7.75% in the next coming year. So, compared to last year, it has toned down the assertiveness, where it has spoken about greater than 8% of the growth. Now, it has reduced 1% of the growth potential. But it has expressed the concern that India is unable to achieve its fullest of growth potential. The fullest of the growth potential it predicted at 8 to 10%. And improvement in investments in agriculture, healthcare, education, these build the necessary capabilities in the Indian economy, and they are necessary for sustaining the growth into the future. On the other hand, tax reforms is widely spoken about. In India, only 5.5% of the people, the earning people, they pay the tax. It is lowest in the world and lowest among the BRICS nations. Now, the tax to GDP ratio in India, it stands at 16.6%. Across the world, it is around 21%. It means India has to focus on its streamlining of the tax system, has to control the tax evasion so that it can raise the tax resources. So there is a situation in India where taxpayer is made burdened with greater tax levels, and the person who does not pay the tax, he totally escapes from the tax net. So what the economic survey suggests these are, the suggestions majorly centered around bringing in GST and doing away with tax exemptions, government raising the slab of minimum taxable amount, all has to be resisted. The GST has to be passed as quick as possible. Along with this, every earning person shall be in a position to pay the tax even if he is in agriculture. So in this case, agricultural income also has to be taxable. Finally, the exemptions which are given on small savings, etc., these have to be reduced. So India's approach has to be every income has to be taxed in this country. And Thomas Piketty recently made one statement. In India, if you take at the bottom of the pyramid and the top level, the most of the income is accumulating at the top level. And the rich do not believe in providing for equality or providing for the nation building. So the rich has to share the responsibility of society building. That's what Thomas Piketty was talking about. In India, income is more taxed rather than property, or wealth gains more than the income. If I buy a land, then automatically my gain from the land is much higher compared to my investment in a business. So the fixed assets are bound to increase further and further. So the present survey, what it says is the fixed assets need to be taxed higher. And the next initiative is towards Make in India. So this talks about certain important aspects related to the Make in India, how to make them really useful to the people. So no country in the world grew without manufacturing sector being the base. Now in India, the manufacturing sector is stagnant for the last almost 6 to 7 years, and it is around 15 to 16% of GDP. Our objective is to raise this to the 25% of GDP by 2022. For this, what we shall do? So the first one is the countervailing duties. A product which is imported costs less than if it is produced in India. So our native industry has many of the negative advantages which have to be done away with. And next is, it would be electricity and other infrastructure related factors has to be provided as quick as possible. And land is an important constraint. But public sector undertakings, they have a huge land banks with them. And shifting away that land banks into the open market and developing the industrial clusters in the rural and urban areas, all these can improvise the Make in India. So, economic survey talks about Trans-Pacific Partnership and its specific impact. So, what does it mean, Trans-Pacific Partnership is about? If India joins this Trans-Pacific Partnership, it would prevent using state-owned enterprises and governmental procurement for the welfare programs. It means if government is procuring for national food security, then automatically it will be obstructed at the TPP. So the TPP and its impact how on the economy will be properly studied. That's what it suggests about. And next is energy, green energy, climate change goals. You know that the sustainable developmental goals and INDCs, intentional targets of India, are nationally determined contributions of India. They have got a lofty ambitions for us. So increasing the solar energy to 1 lakh megawatts by 2022 and wind energy to 60,000 megawatts by 2022 is a big task. In this context, our installed capacities in solar energy are less than 5% of this target. So, if we want to take this forward, alternative energy program forward, we need private investment to flow in. And next is the fiscal deficit target. Government is confident that it can achieve its fiscal deficit target of 3.9% for 2016-17 and 2015-16 and 3.5 for the 16-17, 3% for the 17-18. It showed its confidence. Coming to the rich feed of subsidies, almost 1 lakh crore of the subsidies are misdirected away from India, misdirected away from the poor in India. So rich takes the benefit of these subsidies. So in this context, the streamlining of the subsidies is very important. So it has to come through something called direct benefits transfer. This is what is the government of India is talking about. So this, to bring in this, we are talking about JAM Trinity, which stands for then Janadhan Yojana, Aadhaar and Mobile. So the major weakness in this is JAM. The financial inclusion did not reach to the expected levels in India. So UPA government has brought in something called bank sathis, the bank correspondents, to make the banking operations or transactions to reach to the grassroots level. But they are not incentivized properly. So taking this foot soldiers into confidence can make the financial inclusion a possibility where the cash delivery becomes much simpler and easier. And coming to food security, it talks about the hope on GM crops, the genetically modified crops. But however, it says the concerns which are existing with this related to diversity, related to the safety, all these have to be addressed as soon as possible. So these are the points of economic survey. Now, as I said to you, in India, the tax payments are very low. Only 5.5% of the people are actually paying the taxes. And our tax to GDP ratio is also low, and these have to be raised. And more people have to be brought into the tax net. Already I have discussed about the DBT. So these are the important articles for today's newspaper. Thank you very much.